Put something different in the car. Yeah, you might. Yes, you might. Exactly. Somebody's got a lot of miles on their car, and perhaps even an oil pressure problem. Thank you. Perhaps even an oil pressure problem in the beginning. Maybe the oil light flickers at idle, and the car uses a 5W30 in it. And you might say to your customer, as a nice guy, a nice mechanic, well, this is what's going on. Have you done our oil pressure test? I think your engine's getting a little worn out. We can solve that oil pressure problem by doing what? Well, we can rebuild the engine. We can replace the engine. It's fixed. It's fixed. Now, I ain't got no $6,000 to dump in this car. I just want to drive it for a couple of months, or maybe 6 months and sell it. Well, we can try putting, instead of 5W30, we'll put 10W30 in it. That might give you money. It will be a reasonable recommendation. A nice guy. Because you can affect the oil pressure by changing the viscosity to a higher viscosity or a lower viscosity. So you make the recommendation to the customer what type of oil to put in it based on what the car is called for. All data, owner's manual, oil filler cap, that's what should go in the car. That's easy. Now there's one other little stipulation. If you ever looked at an owner's manual, guess how many people look at an owner's manual? How many people in here have read their owner's manual for their car? 3? I bought an owner's manual for my Tahoe because when I bought it used, it didn't have one, and I never looked at it. Never looked at it. Nobody looks at the owner's manual. But in there, like if you lived in Alaska, North Dakota, Arizona, there's a recommendation in there that even though it says to use 5W30, if you live in Alaska and your normal temperatures are that much lower, or Minot, North Dakota in the wintertime, that your temperature is going to be lower, it might tell you to use 0W30. And if you're in Arizona, it might tell you 10W30. And there are recommendations in the owner's manual to do that. So should you find yourselves working in another area like that, that's something to pay attention to. Now what else do you know about motor oil? Or what don't you know about motor oil? Who determines what kind of additives, what kind of standards this oil can hold up to? I mean, if you buy oil, Kmart brand motor oil, is it any good? No. Good. Motor oil is motor oil. Is Kmart motor oil any less protective, any less quality than, what's the good one? Valvoline, Castrol, Pennzoil? Well, there are standards that are set. In order for that motor oil to meet those standards, it has to be a certain quality. Those standards are set by API. And I know that's going to be on your quiz, because I'm writing the quiz. What I'm doing now, you notice we didn't have a chapter 13 quiz? Didn't have it? Tomorrow we're going to have a chapter 13, 14 combined quiz. That's the way I do it. API is the American Petroleum Institute. And the American Petroleum Institute sets the standards for the additives, the friction modifiers, the detergents, the type of detergents, the levels of them, the lubrosity of the oil, how slippery the oil must be. And they test this stuff that it meets these certain standards. Once it's met their standards, it gets their stamp. You all have seen the stamp on the oil cans, maybe never paid much attention to it. API, service, SN. It'll say energy conserving something down here. In the middle will say the weight of the oil. API service SN is the current grade, the current high level for the qualifications, the standards of the motor oil. And it may change. 4 years ago, it was SM was the standard. And then the manufacturers and the Petroleum Institute got together and they said, we need it to be better. We need to raise the standards on some of this. And now SN is the grade. Most of the motor oil you buy sitting on the shelf at the dealership, sitting on the shelf at the shop you're in, unless you're in a shop that does very little work, is already going to be SN. You don't really need to pay a lot of attention to that. Where you need to pay attention to is if you're working in a shop and now the 2015 or 2016 cars are coming in. You need to stop for a second and see if maybe what's going to come after SN? The next grade upgrade will be SO. So you need to watch a brand new car that they haven't changed the classification. There's another, that says API service. What does the S stand for? Because there was, back through the years, it started out as SA, was the original. The S stands, API says it stands for service, meaning gasoline engines. S for spark. You get a diesel in the shop, you can't use this motor oil. And that's where you need to be careful. You can't put this motor oil in a diesel. It won't meet the standards. It doesn't meet the quality specifications for a diesel engine. The detergent's in it, the friction modifiers in it, the quality of that oil, the standards of that oil are different for a diesel engine. Got to hold up under different conditions. You're going to get a lot more contaminants in diesel oil. Anybody change oil on diesel? There is a distinct blackness to the motor oil. There is a whole lot more soot and a whole lot more combustion byproducts in diesel oil, carbon. The oil can come out real black. The oil's got to be able to handle all that carbon. Diesel oil is different. CJ4, I think, is the current standard. Yes, CJ4 is the current standard. So you're changing oil on a diesel, you've got to make sure it's CJ4. It is diesel certified. What's the C stand for? API says it's commercial. Compression ignition. So that's an easy way to remember. S is for gasoline spark ignition. C is for diesel compression ignition. Those two oils. Now there are oils that meet both. SM-CJ4. That's universal. Can be used in anything. Oil pump. Y'all took your oil pump apart, right? A couple of gears in there. How does that pump move the oil? Pumps. Yes, sir. It traps the oil. As those gears come together, it traps the oil in the cavities between the gears and takes it from this side and puts it to this side. That's the way oil pumps work. They're called positive displacement pumps. They take a little volume of oil that fits between the gears out of the oil pan and put it in the oil gallery. Does the oil pump create pressure? No, not directly. The pressure is created by the clearance. The oil pump is just like a water pump, pumping the water through a hose. Now, there's no nozzle on the hose, the water just runs out. There's no pressure. And that's what an oil pump will do. It'll just move oil. Just moving the oil along. You put a nozzle on the hose and close it down, now you've got high pressure. Well, the nozzle in the engine is the clearance in the bearings. So Bearings wear out, it's like opening the nozzle on the hose, and letting more oil out, and the pressure drops. 3 types of oil pumps. What you guys had was called a rotary pump, where you have a gear inside a gear. There's also a gear pump where there's 2 gears side by side that move the oil. And a crescent pump was a modified rotary pump. Crescent pumps I haven't seen in a gasoline engine. I've seen them in transmissions, automatic transmissions, big time. So they move a little more oil than a rotary pump. Oil pressure relief valve. What's it do? Relieves excessive pressure. Real cold morning, wrong motor oil, pressure gets too high, too much pressure is bad for the engine. Did you take apart the pressure relief valve in your oil pump? Oh, bummer! I make my class do it. And they get to use this thing to test the spring. Oh!
Low flight shit, boy.
Oh, that's ruined.
Off the air.
This plug right here on the side of the oil pump. Underneath this plug is a heavy spring, and there's a piston in the bottom. And that oil pressure, took it apart? Yeah. Okay. That piston's pushing that oil pressure pushes that piston up. If there's too much pressure, it pushes it up to an opening that allows that oil to drain back to the oil pan. It's usually around 80, 90 psi. It opens up and stops the pressure. So it limits the maximum pressure that can be developed in the engine. Oil pressure relief valve is in the oil pump. I point that out because I know there's a question about some of the valves in the lubricating system. There's one more we're going to talk about. But the pressure relief valve is in the pump. Pickup screen. You look at the pickup screen. This can be a source of an oil pressure problem. Sludge is something we're going to talk about in a minute. Sludge can build up in the engine and get flushed down here and plug that screen up. Any kind of particles that are left in the oil, you plug that screen up. I had an interesting experience with a Mazda Millennia. Right after the Millennias came out, 95, 96, supercharged Millennia. The guy, the number 2 guy at the dealership, the comptroller, who's the guy that controls all the money at the dealership. They all got demos. They get to drive new cars for free. So he had his brand new Millennia demo. Now he's the guy that controls the money. So undoubtedly he had controlled somebody's money and they didn't like it. One of the salesmen, don't know who did it, never figured out who did it. He was coming to work one morning, called up and said the car quit running. Towed it in. I got picked to check it out. Got oil in it. Engine's locked up. Engine is locked up. Oil's good, looks clean, right level. Call Mazda. This car's got 1,800 miles on it. Brand new model, brand new engine. Mazda goes, take the engine out, we're going to send you another one, send the engine to us. We got to see what happens. Okay. I did all that work, put a new engine. They didn't even have a replacement engine. I got an engine off the assembly line, which was rather interesting, because it came with the alternator, wiring harnesses, everything. Just the way they would drop it in on the assembly line made that job a little easier. But put the engine in, got paid under warranty, crated the engine up, and they sent it back to Japan to look at it. And they called up about a month and a half later and go, we're not paying for this engine. The boss comes and tells me, oh, no, you're not getting paid for that engine. Ooh, you're not getting paid. Now, I'm getting paid for my work. You're wrong. What was wrong with the engine? Because it was full of beans. What? And that's what? Because it was full of beans. Somebody had poured beans, a can of beans in the engine. And those beans worked their way down and plugged that screen up and stopped the oil. And whatever pieces of that beans and bean juice got swished through that screen and got into the engine, beans are not a good lubricant. They don't work. So what did I say? When the boss said, you're not getting paid and it's full of beans, I said, are those Japanese beans or American beans? If they're Japanese beans, it came from the factory. Somebody in the factory was mad to dump beans in it. American beans probably happened here. he actually, off he went, called up the factory rep, and, were they Japanese beans, American beans? And somebody had to scratch their head a little bit, and they came back to know they were American beans. I'm sure they were. But somebody got mad. Somebody got their paycheck cut, didn't get paid for something they thought they were supposed to get paid for, and they said, or they got fired, and they said, screw you, dump beans in his engine. But that's what the screen does, picks up particles, and that is going to be an oil pressure problem that you will deal with in your career. That screen has gotten clogged up. And we'll talk about the remedies and how to figure out what to do in a little bit. But the screen blocks a big particle. Oil pan or sump stores the oil. Manufacturers determine the size and shape of the oil pan to hold that oil. Oil baffles, I saw a couple of your engines have baffles in it. The oil pan gasket had a plate on the back end of it on some of these engines. That's a baffle. That keeps that oil from sloshing around too much. You get on an exit ramp, you're making that long circle turn. And how do you make that turn? How do we drive around that turn? The sign says safe speed 25. What does that mean? 50. That's exactly what it means. It means you can make it around that turn at 50. So how do you drive? 50. Yeah. Sometimes 50. I can't usually push the Tahoe more than double the exit speed. Usually the Tahoe, it's a little big, a little top heavy. If it says 30 and I go 60, I can usually get around it no problem. Try to do 70, it's going to begin to get a little squirrely. But what happens when you're going around that ramp? The oil in the oil pan. Up on the side of the oil pan. So the baffles are there to help slow that movement, because if it all moves up on the side of the oil pan, the oil pickup is going to be sitting down there sucking nothing. And the oil light's going to come on. That'll happen a lot of times if the oil level is low, because at that point it's designed to go around an exit ramp with the proper oil level in it. Maybe not the way some of us drive, but it is designed. And the baffles reduce that. But if you only got 2.5 quarts of oil in the engine, going around an exit ramp, the light flickers. So your customer comes in and goes, when I'm going around a ramp, my oil light comes on. The lights go off up here and go, well, the oil light's coming on, that indicates an oil pressure problem, but it only does it on exit ramps. I think you got an oil level problem. Check it. Oh yeah, not even on the dipstick. There's your problem. You need an oil change, proper level. Yes, sir.
What happens if the car say 6 quarts and put somebody 2%?
Very good question. What happens if you put too much oil in the engine? It's not going to lock it up. Well, I'll take it back. Ultimately, it might lock it up. No, it doesn't raise the pressure. Actually lowers the pressure. If that oil level is brought up high enough that the crankshaft can hit the pool of oil, it's going to whip the oil up. It's going to whip air into the oil. And then it's going to begin to pick up air bubbles and that foam, and that's going to reduce the oil pressure. That's going to reduce the lubrication. Too much oil is a problem. 1 quart is probably marginal. If you ever get more than 1 quart extra oil in there, yeah, it's going to be whipping that oil into a foam, and it's going to cause a problem. Dry sump is another way to completely eliminate sloshing. High-performance cars, race cars, use a dry sump. There's no oil in the oil pan. The oil pan is just basically a pump at the bottom of the engine that drains it back. And it's stored remotely in a reservoir. And then the oil pump, usually externally mounted, can have plumbing, hoses and pipes to feed the oil to different parts of the engine separately. It can feed the camshaft separately from the crankshaft. It can feed the turbocharger or supercharger separately. It doesn't have to pass through a bunch of other galleries to get there. You can have multiple oil pumps. You can have a pump in the sump to return it to the reservoir, and a main pump to pump it to the engine. Allows for lower engine placement because you don't need to have an 8-inch oil pan on the bottom. What's lower engine replacement do for a performance car? Say that again. What is lower engine placement? If you can lower the engine down in the frame on a performance car, go around a ramp faster. Yeah, you can turn faster, lower center of gravity. Then it also just eliminates sloshing motor oil because there's no motor oil in the oil tank.
No, where is it?
Motor oil?
Yeah.
Line 3, oil reservoir is mounted remotely.
Reservoir.
It'll be a bottle or a tank on the side of the engine, off the engine. Pump to it with a hose or a pipe, and then take it back to the main pump.
Still in the car. So it can just wash the oil.
What's that?
Still in the car.
Still in the car. It's not like pumped into your
So
garage.
then
You
it
don't
just
get
wash
it.
around somewhere else.
No, not at all. There's a reservoir right there. It's a long, tall, vertical reservoir.
Can we go back real quick and jot them notes down, sir? That line.
The size and shape of the reservoir is designed so that it will hold the oil and make it available to the pump, even in a high-speed turn, even in a rapid acceleration. That's the other thing, like drag racing. Some of these cars approaching 300 miles an hour in a couple seconds. Where does that motor oil go within an oil tank? Straight to the back. All the way to the back of the pan. Drive some, feeds the engine. Just telling you about it. There might be a question on there about it, but it is available. You might run into it. You're working in a Porsche shop, an exotic shop. You might run into it even in a Jiffy Lube or something. Somebody rolls their Porsche through a Jiffy Lube. Dry sump. Oil stored remotely. Oil pumps. Oil pumps. Usually mounted externally. That's a belt-driven pump on that engine. The electric. The oil filter. Y'all know what an oil filter is, right? How many change the oil filter? How many have changed your own oil? Change oil on something. Some people in there never change oil. Never experienced? Maybe. Never change oil? Yeah. Changing the oil filter, there's usually two basic kinds. One is going to be a metal spin-on can like we have on the engine we're working on. Anybody seen the cartridge type filters? Anybody's car have the cartridge type filters? Spin-on metal filter. You've all seen these, right? Because we all put one on our engine.
No.
You put this? You put this on that engine? Oh, you put this on that engine. Replaceable element, replaceable cartridge type filters. They became more, they actually used them forever. That was probably the original type filters they put on engines. And then they went to the quickie change. In the 60s, everything went to this with the little metal can, making it quicker and easier. They went back to these in the 90s because they began to pass all these environmental laws. When you do an oil change, where can you put the filter? No. You're taking the filter off. Yeah, and then what? Now you've done 20 oil changes, you've got 20 oil. Where? No. It's against the law to throw in the trash. Oil filters have to be recycled. So they began to think that rather than taking this weight and recycling, they would take this weight and recycling. It would be easier. They reclaim the oil out of these. They smash these and take the oil out and reclaim it. You can't send these off to the landfill. You can't throw them in the trash. If your shop's throwing them in the trash, eventually the garbage collector or somebody at the dump or the landfill is going to go, wait a minute, we're getting a load of oil filters. Where they come, they'll figure it out and come back to your shop and there'll be fines and all that nasty stuff. But they started doing these. Now they kind of went away from these because they found it's just as easy to smash these and get the oil out of them. They just simply shred these things, crush them, and drain the oil out. But either one, changing these filters, you will screw up. Everybody in the shop will make fun of you. It will happen. Sooner or later. Well, how tight do you put them on? Hand tight. Use a tool to take them off. Actually, usually most people reach up with their hand to try to take them off. Usually you can get them off with your hand. If you can't, use a tool to take it off. Hand tight. A little bit of oil on here. Hand tight. Good and hand tight. Good squeeze on it, not just making contact. Where are you going to screw up? This seal. Put a double ring on. This seal's going to stick to the engine. 1 out of every 100, 150 oil changes, every oil filter you take out, this seal's going to stick to the engine. And you're in a big hurry, and your girlfriend left you, and your dog's at the vet, and you got this on your mind, and that on your mind. Somebody stole your car, and you're worrying about that. And you're going to grab the new oil filter, and you're going to spin it up there, put the drain plug in, oil in there. Now there's a text message from your girlfriend, she wants the dog. She left it, she's going to take the dog. Now, start the car up. What happens? You can hear the sound. And that 4.5 quarts of oil that you put in the engine, on the floor. Because it won't seal. Thankfully, it won't seal. If it did seal, and for a little while, and you gave it to the customer, that would happen out on the street somewhere, and it'd ruin the engine, and then you'd be in big trouble. But now you just got a big mess to clean up and change the filter again. It will happen, but be very careful. Try to avoid it by always, when you do an oil change, if you can't see it directly, even if the filter's got it on it, just out of that 1 in a million shot that it actually made it 5,000 miles with a double gasket, put your hand up there and feel bare metal on the engine. Make sure that gasket's not up there. And then put your filter on. Make sure it didn't stick. Don't get in a hurry. The problem is, the real problem is, it usually happens to a rookie. We would just sit at the dealership and wait. New guy gets hired, he's doing an oil change, And sure enough, within the first week, he'd be standing there, ankle getting motor oil. Ah! Get the bucket, get it cleaned up. But it'll happen. It even happens to an experienced mechanic. You do so many oil changes. I don't know how many oil changes I did in my life. Just good. You do so many, it gets routine. You've got to make part of your routine checking this gasket. These guys have a separate little housing. It'll be aluminum, a lot of them are plastic. Housing that contains this. You've got to remove the housing. Different ways of removing the housing. Most of them will have some sort of a wrench flat on them that you can put a wrench or socket on to unscrew it. Some of them, the wrench flats will be larger, and you can put like a cap-type oil filter wrench on it and remove it. What you don't put on these housings is a pair of channel lines. You don't put a big pair of pliers on them, because especially the plastic will crush them. You can even distort the aluminum housings and maybe put a crack in it that you don't even see. Use the proper tools to take these housings off. When you get the oil filter, now this one comes with an O-ring in it. There's going to be another O-ring or two that come in the box with the oil filter. They're on the housing, to seal the housing. You're in a hurry, you make flat rate money, what do you do with the O-rings? You use the new O-rings. You take the old ones off, put the new ones on. It's not worth the 1/10 of a second it's going to take you to change the O-ring. Try to be quicker and just, looks okay. You put it in there and it leaks, engine gets locked up. Just because you didn't change it. It's going to ruin your day, your week, your month. Who's going to pay for the engine if you did an oil change on it and it leaks out? Yeah. Most likely, you're going to be stuck with it. What's a customer going to do when they drive away and a week later the drain plug falls out because you left it loose and the oil runs out? What's the customer going to do?
Try to get his lawyer.
Try to what?
Try to get his lawyer.
No. Red lights on the dash. What's a customer going to do?
Bring it back to you. So you just got to roll.
They're going to drive it back. They call you up. Hey, my oil light came on, all the oil's on the ground. Get a tow truck. Don't care. I'll pay the $150. Tow it in here. You know, a lot of them drive it back. And once they start driving it back, that's when the trouble starts. Oh, I'm trying to get back to the other, locked up. It's a mile down the road. The car won't move. Well, boy, now you got an engine. It's an oil change. While it's a mundane, simple, boring procedure, you've got to be very, very careful doing that procedure. Don't make mistakes. The mistakes you make can be critical. I talk about the phone call from your girlfriend that's leaving you and taking the dog. All that stuff, you can't be interrupted and forget what you're doing during the procedure. Putting the drain plug in, I had a procedure, I had on my oil drain pan, it had thumb screws that held the top on the can. And I hung my oil filter wrench on there, and I hung my oil drain plug wrench on there. And when I was under the car, when I put the drain plug in, I didn't walk out from under the car to do nothing until it was tight. I put the filter on, now we're done. Now we can move our oil pan out from underneath there. Set routine and a procedure, double checking myself, making sure I tighten the drain plug, making sure I put the oil filter on, didn't double gasket, bring it down. The other thing I did, because this you would catch, but the other thing I always did in my routine was, before I started, I took the oil filler cap off and I set it right beside the hood latch. So there's no way that something could interrupt me and something could interfere with what I was doing, and I would drive that car, yeah, I got oil in it, drive the car outside without putting oil in it. The oil filler cap is right there. Go to close the hood and it won't close. I didn't put oil in it. Double checks and balances to make sure that I didn't screw up an oil change, even after working on the cars for 37 years. Valves. There's two more valves in the lubrication system. There is an anti-drain back valve. Anti-drain back valve became important with hydraulic lifters and hydraulic lash adjusters. If the oil, it's in the oil galleries, it's up in the cylinder head, it's inside the crankshaft, it's feeding the lifters and the lash adjusters. The car sits overnight or sits for a couple of days. That oil is slowly going to drain out of the engine. Gravity is going to pull it back to the oil pan, backwards through the oil pump. It's going to drain back. There's a valve in the oil filter. That's a check valve, an anti-drain back valve that holds the oil in the engine. So when you shut the engine off, the oil can't flow backwards through the oil filter. It stays up in the lifters. It stays up by the cam. Stays up by the crank. So when you start it up, you don't have that momentary clickety-clack of empty lifters. They're already lubricated.